Mr. Legrone? I see David's here.
Yes.
And so I think everyone's here that's going to be here. I got a text from Mr. Malone, and his son had some surgery at UC Davis, and there's some complications.
All right.
And so he sends his regards, but he is, of course, predisposed to addressing that, so.
I think that's a reasonable explanation and for an excused absence.
In fact, it's pretty touchy, and I just asked that maybe we can have a moment of silence at some point, just thinking.
Why don't we start off
because
that
it's
way?
pretty significant.
Yep.
Brandon?
One of us to hand it out.
Yeah. What's that?
Brandon?
His son.
Yes,
Give it
he
to
has
him.
two sons. One's Brandon, I can't remember the other.
I think it's Brandon.
Jackie, whenever you're ready to start the meeting.
I'm ready.
Are we recording?
Yes.
If we could have a roll call, please.
Committee Member Thompson,
Here?
Smith,
Here?
Grover, Flicker,
Here.
Bunker, Malone,
He's
Castro, here, Seachow, Delmeyer, here, Terry,
Here.
Quintel.
All right, if we could all stand and face the American flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Salute. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll move on to public communications. This part of the meeting is dedicated to anybody from the public who would like to speak. Seeing none, we'll move on. Do you have any, Madam Clerk? See, hey, I've always wanted to be the mayor, and I act like I'm the mayor, so this is my one opportunity, so.
You go right ahead.
I do not have any blue speaker cards.
Thank you. Our first piece of business will be our committee orientation. What you have before you today is a packet of information, and I realize that you're getting it today as you sit down, and you're going to need some time to digest this. This meeting that we're having today is basically an orientation, an establishment of the committee, a meeting schedule, and then the budgetary part of it that we're discussing is framework. It's not anything that's set in stone. It's not anything that absolutely can't change. It is just a suggested framework so that we can prepare a budget for our city council to move forward on. This committee is set up to meet quarterly. So what will happen, since this is the first time that we've done this is actually the first meeting we've ever had of an oversight committee, and this year as we go will be the first time that we've ever had the quarterly meetings, is we're going to have to do a lot of work at all of those meetings and probably in between where we can get ourselves orientated. We can figure out exactly what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what adjustments and changes we need to make to the framework that we put in place. So as you see this in front of you today, understand this is nothing more than framework. This is not anything that's going to happen tomorrow. You know, if you say, you know, this meets the minimum standards or parameters of Measure U, that doesn't mean that tomorrow we're going to run out and do all this. We don't have the money. That's the reality. The money won't come in until the course of the next year. So it's going to take time for that to happen. So what we have to have done, though, by charter, is we have to deliver a budget to the city council by the first meeting in July. So that's why we have to have this meeting now, why we have to prepare this budget, why this is coming at you the way that it is. And I understand it is short notice. So if we could just start and go through our packet that we have in front of you first and foremost, so you understand what you have. It's going to require some homework because there is no expectation that you read all this now or you know all this stuff today. These are all things you can take with you. Every document you have is a public document, so it isn't secret or restricted or anything like that. The first one I want to talk about is City of Oroville Ordinance number 1829. That's this one. What this ordinance is, or this chapter 3 of the municipal code of the City of Oroville, this is Measure U. Measure U was the ballot. This is the documentation behind the ballot that supports the revenue measure of the sales tax. It very specifically lays out what the sales tax is for, the percentage of the sales tax, and the duration of that. Measure U is pretty much a straightforward measure. It was a general tax, what that means is it's not a specific. A general tax is a tax that could be collected that the local municipality can, and you know, but nobody wants to hear this, but it can be used for anything that the city council chooses. However, Measure U has a few different things in there to ensure that doesn't happen, or it can happen, but it shouldn't happen. The first and foremost is the Oversight Committee. And you'll notice in your staff report that I gave you that there's one part in there, and we'll get to that in a minute, that is I put in bold and I highlighted. The reason why I did that is because I believe it's very, very important and that we take this job that you have very seriously. Your sole purpose as a Oversight Committee is to ensure that these dollars are spent in accordance with Measure U. You will not have a problem with that when this current staff is here. I'm not concerned about myself or the staff or anyone else not using that money appropriately, because we've been here from the formation of it through where we are now. So we have a very thorough understanding. That is for people in the future. I want them to know that this money cannot be used for just, you know, we can't decide that we want to, I don't know, paint all of our sidewalks purple and that's a good idea and this is the money we're going to use. As outrageous as that might sound, who knows if that could happen. We don't want that to happen. What we need from the Oversight Committee, first and foremost, is oversight to ensure that it's used right. Yes, sir?
I missed something. You said, I went through this whole thing, I don't see anything bold or highlighted.
Which one do you have there, Mr. Flicker?
The code.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's not that. It's in the staff report. The one with the City of Oroville seal on the top. I was going to come to that later. I was just mentioning that as I was talking. It'll be the only document that has a in-color city seal.
I don't have that.
I have an extra one.
What happened?
Okay.
Oh, it's at the bottom. And at the bottom of that first page is where it's in bold.
I have.
So anyway, I will come back to that. I just wanted to touch on that and why that's like that before I forgot and I got moved on to something else. Your chapter 3.18, again, is about the Measure U. This will give you all of the information that you need or should want to know about Measure U. So that's something for you to take and read. It's not, if you're having problems sleeping or something like that, this is a good document. But it does have pertinent information in certain sections. Others of it is, was written by our attorney and is difficult. The other things that you have in your packet are pretty much about the operation and how we run this meeting. We run our meetings not under Robert's Rules of Order, but Rosenberg's Rules of Order. So what we've included for you is a cheat sheet, which on the back is a grid, and it actually says Rosenberg's Rules of Order cheat sheet. So it's just general information for you on that. And then we've given you a more extensive packet that says Rosenberg's Rules of Order from the League of Cities. These are something that you should review so you understand the operation of the meeting, the withdrawal, or I'm sorry, the motions, the seconds, and things like that. We'll cover those, and we'll go slow and easy if we get into a situation where we don't know how to proceed on that. So we will help you through all of that. We've also provided you with a summary of the Brown Act. That is something that you are subject to. It is something that is important. Brown Act violation is anytime that you have more than a quorum and you have a discussion about something, don't do it. There's many variations of Brown Act violations that you can get into. I mean, hypothetically, since we have an 11-person panel, if we have 6 members six members are a quorum, anything more than 6. So if 7 of you discuss something or 6 of you discuss something that is agendized and on the meeting, that could be a problem for us. I mean, so we cannot do that. If, say hypothetically, I'm going to pick on Mark. Mark calls Brian, who then in turn, Mark calls Scott, who then in turn calls Linda, who then in turn calls Kay, who then in turn calls Eric, who then in turn calls Sherry, and every one of them says, hey, I talked to Brian and he said this, I talked to Scott and he said this, I talked to these 3 and they said that. You've now conducted a meeting. I mean, even though he's individually talked to each of you, you've still conducted a meeting. So please go over these rules, kind of see what they are, have a general understanding. If you're ever in doubt, don't do it. Or call one of us. I mean, if there's a problem or a question or anything, let's talk about it. And if we don't know the answer, we'll get our attorney on the phone and he'll give us an answer. But the best and safest thing you can do is if you're ever in question, just don't do it. Back away from it and let it be. So please read that, review that before our next meeting. We also have in front of you our Code of Conduct. We also have a very large copy of our Code of Conduct and meeting rules. Oops, excuse me. Over here on the wall. It's about etiquette, civility, cell phones, things like that. one of my pet peeves are phones going off during the middle of meetings. Please shut them off. The other thing I don't like to see, and I know a lot of people have mentioned this, is when committee members, board members, council members are texting during meetings. The people feel like they're not being listened to because, but I also understand on the other side, people are able to multitask, but it sends a bad message. So if you can, or if it becomes troublesome for you, just please set your cell phone upside down on the top of the dais and, because then everybody knows you're not on it, you're not doing anything. You could also actually get into an issue with a Brown Act violation of doing that. So just be careful with that, and just, we try to be civil. I mean, that's the biggest thing. We can vehemently disagree on something, we can debate something vigorously, but at the end of the day, I think we're all here to make Oroville better, make Oroville a better place, and make sure that we do the right thing with this money. So let's just keep that in mind, and and if you do say something that's not nice, then you have to say 2 nice things.
That's right.
So that's our code of conduct. Please, when you have an opportunity, review that and go over that. The last item that we have for you to review at a later time is our Oversight Committee bylaws. It's just kind of the rules of this meeting, how we're going to conduct it, when we're going to have it, what kind of support you can expect from us, the eligibility, just like that. It's pretty straightforward. You will, as a member of this committee, receive some ethics training and some, I believe, do they get the sexual harassment training too? The 1, 2, 3, 4?
I believe they're required to take it as well.
Okay, so we may have to get that set up again, because I know some of you have had that, some of you have not. We have people come in to give that type of training. It's something that you have to have biannually, and it's we've just had that, I believe, so we may have to do it again. So we'll get you set up with that. So with that being said, that's just kind of our orientation. Do any of you have any questions that you need to ask? Or I should have introduced myself. I just assumed that everybody knows me. My name is Bill Lagrone. I am the police chief for the city of Oroville, the fire chief, and an assistant city administrator. And to my right is Mr. Tom Lando. He is our city administrator. We have Jordan Daly, who is our supplemental benefit fund coordinator. To her right, we have Jackie Glover, who is a city assistant clerk. Sitting behind her is Liz Ernstrom, our HR manager. And next to her is Ruth Duncan, not like the donut shop, spelled the other way. She is our finance director.
And Ruth just got married a couple weeks ago, right?
We're all getting used to that. She was Ruth Wright.
So I personally would like to have each of the members introduce themselves and maybe give a 15-second reason why they applied and what they hope this committee.
Okay, I'm going to just do a couple more introductions, and I think that's a good idea. We also have the Assistant Public Safety Director, Joe Deal, here with us. We also have his wife. Tammy, would you like to come and talk? We have Mayor Chuck Reynolds. And we have... And sitting in the very back is Wade Atterbury. He is our manager in the Parks and Trees and Streets Department for the city of Oroville. So I think that was a good idea, Linda. If we can, let's just start with Ms. Bunker, and we'll, unless you don't want to start, then we'll start on the other side.
Oh, you might want to tell them how to use their mics.
There's
Yeah,
a
we-
red light coming on.
The one next in front of you doesn't work?
Yeah, you have to kind of,
Okay, fine. I'll scoot over closer to Eric. Sherry Bunker, I was a former city council member, and I care about this community immensely.
Eric Smith, City Council.
Hi, my name is Kay Castro. I am a native Orovillian, if that's a word. Love this community. I've recently moved back and getting more involved in the community, and this is a good way to make an impact and have our community's voices be heard, and I'm really honored to be on the committee. Thank you.
Linda Dahlmeyer, former mayor, so this seat feels really comfortable. Not so much anymore, but because I was the former mayor and I was also involved in Measure U over the years, that I think I probably had some valuable input or insight on what safety could mean to this community in the long run. And thank you for the opportunity.
Scott Thompson, also City Council, honored to serve here, appointed, but glad to serve in this capacity.
Brian Flicker, born and raised here. Just wanted to make sure that we had enough people on the committee and had a voice of reason.
We have a voice of reason. Mark Grover, 30 years in business in Butte County. I live in the city, and I would like to help ensure that the funds that the taxpayers have entrusted us with indeed go to public safety. Thank you.
Dave Quintel, oh no, I'm not city attorney. Third generation Orvillian. I just want to walk away being an advocate for Measure U.
Steve Terry, lived in Oroville for about 38 years, married nearly 40, so we moved back here pretty early. Been around for a lot longer than that, and I love this community. It's what I do, is do anything I can to help the city of Oroville.
I'm Casey Chow. I've been in this community since '88. I'm a behavioral counselor, and I really want to make a difference for this community. Thank you for having me on here.
I have to thank each of you for doing this. This is not, you don't get paid. All you get is criticized. So, and believe me, we do that in abundance. So you will feel that sharply, I'm sure. So, but thank you for doing that. Thank you for caring enough to do it. Thank you for being involved. This is something that it's very important to me that we maintain the public's trust in what we do and what we do with this money. I mean, we've made a deal. They've done their part. We need to do ours now. And I appreciate you being here to provide that oversight to ensure we're headed down that path. So with that, I believe that, we've had just a general overview, kind of an orientation of what we're doing. The meetings will be in this chamber. They will be quarterly. They will be at typically they'll be at 5:30 in the evening, unless we have some sort of a goal setting or brainstorming, or if we're looking for something different, it'll probably be during the day, but we'll make sure that it fits around everybody's schedule. We'll put it out there and see what we can and can't do. So we'll work on that when we come to that point. Those won't be frequent, but they will be, from time to time that could come up. So with that, I believe we've had just a general orientation of what we need to do, so we can move on to item number 2. Item number 2 is it's important that this committee has a chair and a vice chair. That will be the person that will run the meeting, that will go through the agenda. As a matter of fact, as soon as you select one, I will stop telling you we'll be going to 2 to 3 to 4. Whoever is the chair will begin to do that. I cannot tell you who to do that. I can only make a suggestion. I would suggest that you have somebody do that who has experience doing that, who has ran meetings, who can get you going. I mean, for the first 6 months or year, however you choose to do that, I would have somebody with experience do this. But now you can pick who you would like to have do that, but
So
it's
Mr.
gonna make your experience easier for you.
I was just going to say I'd like to make a motion.
All right, go ahead.
And if you,
Go ahead, the floor is yours.
You're done? Okay, good. So I'd like to make a motion that we appoint former Mayor Linda Dunbar
I second.
as the chair and Mark Grover as the vice chair.
I second that too.
You get to conduct the vote.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. All right, Chairperson Dalmeyer, it's all yours.
Thank you for the confidence. Well, I see there's not, and it said there's recommendations, none. So can you explain what that is under each, am I supposed to talk about a recommendation under there? Because I've seen it a couple of times on here.
On which item?
On both items, on all the items, it has
On
recommendation.
item number 3, if you just call the item and then the recommendation is staff's recommendation for when we should hold the meetings.
Okay.
If the Oversight Committee would like to do other ones, we can do that. We just need to do it on a quarterly basis. So
Okay.
we just need to set dates in those months that are listed for when the meetings work for the Oversight Committee.
So example, moving back to item number 1, it has recommendation information related to roles and responsibilities of the committee, recommendation was none. That would have been an area that I might have suggested that we have a goal-setting session on we got 11 people together that are new, that helping us define public safety, what's a safe community, and really kind of getting our feet wet together on how we feel about why we're here. And because, as I've said before, that once you fill the shoes of what you think public safety is or means from this dais, there's a big community out there that thinks maybe differently. And coming to the table of, so you have the police officers and the fire officers, and you have the code enforcement, but what about safe lights in the parks? What about sidewalks? What about, trees, safe trees? It just goes really quite a bit farther. And as opposed to having disagreements about that, coming together with
A common vision.
of just like, well, how do we feel? How do our families feel? And really kind of drawing a circle around that and just saying, yeah, you know what, I can buy into that down the road, 5-10 years, and maybe kind of do a vision of what a safe community means.
And that will
I
help.
would suggest that your next meeting, which would be in February, you schedule several hours, maybe half a day,
half a
to
day.
do that.
Right.
I would also point out that in the measure, it's,
Our next meeting is a lot sooner than that.
is it?
That's the next one Tom's going to be here for.
Okay.
But the rest of us will be here in
But
August.
somewhere between now and the next
I'm
meeting,
sorry.
maybe try and
I
get
was
a.
looking at the months in this thing. Whatever the
get
next,
something like that
next
together
meeting.
that's gonna be fun, that's gonna be thoughtful, and so we can kind of build a parameter around
Oh, I read
what
that.
is safety?
I read the
What's a
agenda.
safe community mean?
Well, also, I wanted to point out, before I misspoke on that, I wanted to point out the measure is broad. It's really what the community needs. So it is public safety, but it's also park maintenance, tree maintenance, park safety, replacing vehicles. Those are all envisioned as you will read this. So it's a broad funding measure, which again, the committee is going to make their recommendations to the council, which ultimately will include them in an annual budget.
Right. And, I mean, it was like, when I was still sitting on the council, watching some of the vehicles that the city drives, I would think to myself, saying, I would not put my family in a car with 500,000 miles on it that has had almost zero maintenance because there just wasn't any parts to replace it, 500,000 miles, and send them on a road trip.
Well, I think, Committee Member Downmeyer, that there isn't any function that the city does that could not arguably be made that is for safety purposes, because we provide infrastructure and safety. It just depends on to what level and to what degree. But I think what you're suggesting is a very good idea. We probably should do that in August. Because as staff, we need to know what is your vision, because, oftentimes we'll be doing the work, but if I don't know what you want, it's very hard for me to create what you want. I mean, otherwise you're just gonna get kind of what I think you wanted, and oftentimes what I think and what the council or this committee may want may be different.
So, and even though tonight is the formality, and the stuff that's presented is really mainly for, as a formality for the budget.
It's framework for a budget.
Framework for a budget that has to be put in there because of the city deadline. Those things can be changed.
Absolutely.
And they change as the city budget. Most
This-
people know that the
This
city
will
budget
ebb and flow. It
is
depends
just
on,
a snapshot.
who knows what's going to happen a month from now. I mean, this committee could look at it and go, hey, we're gonna spend every penny of this money on this particular issue because this particular thing happened. We don't know what that is at this point, but, it is designed to be flexible like that. I mean, what this committee is charged to do is to ensure when I come back to you and I say, hey, I want to spend $4.8 million on whatever, you need to look at that and compare it to what is allowed in there. Is it an allowable expense? If it is, then that, is worthy of your recommendation to the city council,
Right.
who ultimately will or will not approve it.
So I have
So-
high hopes for that, including staff, department heads, key employees from each division,
Absolutely.
that have a say, so you can see from the inside and out, you know, that we all go home to our friends and families and talk about what safety is, and then we'll come back. Okay.
And Madam Chair, I would suggest, because I know how hard it is with 7 council members, I suggest you try and zero in on a date in August, now, so that Jackie doesn't have to call 15 times and try and get a date and a time.
I have a question. When's the budget due?
July 1st.
So we're gonna do this after the budget?
We're
To
gonna
make
talk about it.
recommendations?
Right now, what you're getting today before you is some framework for budgeting, and then after that, if we have to change things, yes. You are ensuring that this meets the parameters of Measure U. I mean, there is no expectation that this committee recommend how many police officers we hire, because you don't have the expertise. We have experts that do that. What your charge is to ensure that that money is spent within the parameters of Measure U.
I would also say, to answer Sherry's question,
I'm sorry,
I didn't hear.
I said, which we've already established, or pretty much anything you want to define as safety related,
it could be.
other than artwork.
It could be. I mean, but it can't be anything that is not within what the original intent of the Measure U, I believe, was for. So we would have to bring that back, and I think that's why the meeting in August is important, to get more of a narrowed down vision of what exactly we're looking for. You know, we're going to make specific recommendations, and then once we throw those out there, then I think that's when we start kicking those things around. I mean, right now, the only thing that
What you have, which is what is in this, is
Right.
specific recommendations
these
up
are
to the wire.
These are specific recommendations that we're going to put into a budget that the council will adopt. This money does not exist yet, so we cannot fulfill these obligations as they exist. As the course of the year goes by, we will do that. We will review those at each quarter as that money comes in, and that may change, and then we will come back and then we will amend or adjust the budget as necessary.
And when are you gonna expect us to say yay or nay, or that this is appropriate or is not appropriate? Because we're not gonna meet again until after the budget's already out. We're gonna have to make that statement tonight.
Correct.
well, I would suggest, and I was gonna answer Sherry's question, which is basically the same as yours, that if you look at the list, it's primarily hiring individuals. I guarantee that won't occur for 3 to 6 to 9 months because of the process. So if you meet again in August and go through a goal-setting session, you'll be well within any framework of expenditures.
Yeah.
The money will not be expended before the committee meets again and goes through a detailed analysis.
We're kind of off topic. We need to get to setting.
I was gonna say that it was the
our
recommendation
establishment
of
of our
the goal
meetings.
setting.
I would like to interject, though, that I'm very, a strong proponent of that goal setting, because it all seems a little cart before the horse for me, because here's what the Measure U says, but here's what the budget says, but and I would love a goal setting session.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And this is the first year of this, so this is kind of cart before the horse. Next, we're going to have a whole year behind us next year, and we're going to have more of an idea of where we're at, what we're going, and how we're doing this. So I know this is very rushed. This is being thrown at you very hard. I understand that. But it won't normally or typically be like that.
So, and and Sherry's aware of this, and Scott and Eric and other people that have actually sat through budget session meetings. Something about what we're looking at right here with expenditures, and maybe Ruth can add a little to this. Tom hit it right on the head, and the budget has to be approved, the city budget has to be approved no later than July 1st. If these items aren't in the budget, you can't even discuss them, because it won't have any allocation to the possibility of doing it. At least if we, as a committee, suggest to add this to the budget, it will have the framework already established for the discussion to be had.
I understand that, but in looking at this, janitorial services, how are we gonna relate that to safety? Or
If I could
administrative
just
assistant?
jump
How are we
in,
gonna relate that to safety?
this measure is not about just public safety. That is not what this measure was. That was the prior measure, Measure R. Measure U was different. Measure U was a general purpose tax that was for all facets of government to ensure the economic viability of Oroville and also all areas of government, because the city was failing in all areas, not just in public safety.
You've been standing there all night talking about safety.
Yes, I have been responding to that. I mean, that's true, and safety is the biggest portion of your budget that
So
you will
this is a
expend.
general use tax,
You can use it for anything you like.
then what would be an inappropriate use of that funds?
Something illegal.
Painting the sidewalks purple.
Paint, yeah. I mean, anything really,
No, it's not anything. I can't think of.
well, no, it is. I mean, you go ahead and you make a suggestion that we do something that's silly and we'll fill this place up. I mean, and that's where the consequence would come from. Not like you're gonna go to jail or anything like that. It's what is gonna be the outcry from the people, and the consequence further would be the repeal of the tax, because it would come to the people, they would see what we were doing, something silly, whatever that may be, and then we would lose it. So there are those types of consequences. I mean, the measure is designed to ensure the viability of the city.
So, yeah, and Brian, I'm gonna, because that's a very good point. I would look at that and say, what does janitorial services have to do with that? Well, I'm gonna speak,
Well, we need to establish dates first. Before we get to number 4, we need to finish number 3.
all right, because I'm gonna speak to that for a minute. Okay,
My recommendation, as long as it's on a Wednesday,
No.
And that's the
some
problem we have.
Thursdays, I'm gone through the 5th, the 15th through the 19th, and the 29th to the 31st. It's a very busy month for me.
Is that August?
August.
yeah, August should be one of those dark months that everybody gets off, August or July or August, right? Even city council should take a month off.
We could do September if that works for everybody, because then that will give us a full quarter. We'll have July, August, and September, somewhere toward the end of September.
Why did we pick these months other than there's one in each quarter? I assumed it was
Quarterly.
budget related.
No, these are not budget. These were just randomly selected by staff who created the agenda.
They're quarterly right now.
And they're smart people.
Well, that's what I was suggesting. The committee needs to come up with a date. And if it winds up being July or September, it does. We tried to get quarterly, so whatever works for the committee.
So
And I
Tuesday-
suspect it's gonna be tough to get a day and date that works for everybody.
Yes.
So that's what we're gonna try.
So I'm also out most of August too, and some of July. So what month is this? May?
This is May.
June.
Basically June.
Almost June.
So September, what does September look like? What would that be, what quarter-wise? September, October, November, December, put us in December or January?
Fiscal year is
Doesn't need to
July?
be exactly
That's the
quarterly.
third quarter. Third quarter, yeah.
But are we on a different are we on fiscal year? But the budget's due next week?
Well, fiscal
July?
on an annual, yeah, on our quarter, that would be
Okay, but,
Why don't we
It would be
set
the
the
first
goal-setting
quarter still.
meeting for in July, sometime in July, so that we can get a better vision
Yeah.
of, where we're headed. I mean, so that we are not, the last thing we want to do is start off on the wrong track. So
That's a
You know.
good idea.
so if we can do our goal setting sooner,
mm-hmm.
in sometime in July, then we can move forward from there.
So, everybody get their books out. Pick a date.
Or if we pick a date in July, that works
So-
for everybody,
So
then,
Wednesdays are not good for you, Mrs. Bunker?
No, it's
Sure. Miss Bunker?
Sherry.
Sherry.
Sufficient.
Sherry, sufficient.
Yeah, Wednesdays are like ugly days for me.
Thursdays are horrible for me.
So what about Tuesdays on and off?
Tuesday on the off council meetings.
So like 23rd?
I have Rotary meeting that, that's not at night, never mind. Yes, Tuesday night's good.
Tuesday night.
There are other committee meetings that happen on Tuesdays.
Are there? I don't know.
Yes.
I said Tuesday nights because I already had it in my calendar.
So July 30th is a fifth Tuesday. If you guys have regular meetings, that one might work.
I'm out of town.
I am in Idaho.
Just trying.
So, let's,
I'm here.
Can we talk about availability in the interview process?
Yeah, but it's
That was
vacation
my-
season.
I remember that question.
Is there any reason why we can't consider Monday, I'm over here. Is there, in the bad boy section, is there any reason why Mondays can't be considered?
No, who has a problem with Mondays?
Just depends on which Monday.
I love Monday.
Are you
does?
days and Mondays?
Mark,
The
Mr.
Lone
Grover,
Star.
If I'm the only one, then I'll change it.
what about Tuesday, the 23rd?
Well, Tuesday is it city council?
No, not the 23rd. That's the 4th. First and third city.
This is just for the goal setting, correct?
Correct.
And we're talking in the
So-
evening and all these.
Well, no, this one would be kind of a
We
daytime.
would like to do it during the day, but if we
That
have
would
to
be
do
good.
evening, we
could
can
make
probably
it
do
during
that.
the day on that Tuesday.
The
I have a
23rd?
Doctor's appointment at 8, but between 9 and 12 I'm available.
Okay,
I have a Rotary meeting at 12.
you might have to
I'm
pass
the
that.
president, so I'm not gonna
Oh,
pass it.
that's right, you're the
Well,
new guy.
we could take a lunch break too at 12. I mean, if that's necessary. Yeah, we could all be your guest.
We could all go up there as your guest. All right, so the 23rd, it works for everybody?
Time?
As
Noonish?
long as it's between 9 and 12,
So
or after 1.
we have the GSA meeting that Tuesday.
Well, let's move them into the,
Okay. And then, well, the other thing is that the council chambers will actually be unavailable, so we'll have to have it up at the CCC,
that's
Which
fine.
is better, because what we wanna do is we wanna have some.
the goal setting.
The goal
Yeah.
setting, we want Post-it notes on the walls, we wanna be able to interact, we want the tables set up.
We're doing AV upgrades and they're happening in that 3-week span after the council meeting.
That's fine. Then we'll move the
Does that work for
GSA meeting
everybody?
into the fireside room and then
What time on the 23rd are we looking at?
9?
9 a.m.
9 a.m.
9 to noon, and I actually think it might take a little longer, if,
Let's just do 9 to noon and then we'll break from 12 to 1 and then from 1 to when we're done. I mean, we may not have to come back, we may have to come back. It depends on what we accomplish
I
in the
would say
morning.
1 to 3, and then basically, as the chair, I could get together with a couple and we can drill down. I mean, there's a real, I'm a facilitator, so I could actually facilitate this and, get people moving, and we do 6 minutes at a time, and you keep moving and you keep moving, and you collect all the data, and then you come back with the data.
Easier.
The date? Okay.
Yep.
CCC building, 9 to noon, and possibly come back, but if we can kill it till at noon,
I'm sorry, which building?
it's,
The old
it's
court.
that little
old
building
court.
up on the hill.
Courthouse.
Oh.
And we
Where-
can send out directions with the agenda.
Harlan, Ryan,
On the levy.
and
Does that work?
You can walk up there.
Okay, and then
Next to
meetings.
it.
Okay. Wow. You did it.
It's where the
We did
Ashtray
it.
Museum used to be.
Yeah, the Ashtray Museum, let's not.
And then if we could, over the course of the time between now and then, if you could, probably what I'll do is I'll have Jackie send out an email with a schedule doodle or something like, whatever they call that, and see if we can get some meetings set up in September, December, March, and July, just to hit the quarters or somewhere in each quarter.
Well, and
For
my
the
thought
next
is
year.
we might want, to try and schedule our meetings so we're not up against the budget
Yes,
next year out.
right, yeah, no, absolutely, we can do that.
So is everybody else good on Wednesdays?
Yeah.
So if we-
Wednesdays are, yeah, good.
If we do it,
generally, half the year Wednesdays are good and half the year Wednesdays are bad for me.
if we do it not on the first or third Wednesday, I'm good.
I play golf every Wednesday night for 6 months a year.
Starting in the summertime, huh?
What time do you have to be there?
I would also suggest that unless you're gonna do it at your July meeting, that part of this is gonna be bringing department heads in, and I suspect really during the day, you're gonna have to have another daytime meeting.
Yeah.
Part of the task is to talk to department heads and see what they need, and that's in the measure.
So is that something that could be done by city staff, create a form, the questionnaire form, and have them do a narrative that we could be supplied with prior to? So we have some pre-information going into it?
You'll be receiving a packet in the future regarding these meetings that we'll have. For each item, there'll be a staff report with the information in there. I really prefer to have the people here that have authored those staff reports or are familiar with those, because there may be very good questions that come up that are technical that I don't know the answer to.
Well, I mean, if there's just even the same question asked from each department or department head or key employees, that, how do you feel about the measure? What is it that just a few things that you could check, some boxes?
We can supply that, actually. Council had a series of presentations from each department head, and the mayor specifically asked, what do you need? And each department provided that. So we can provide that, and then you also can talk to the department heads.
I mean, it just gives us a little more reading material to,
Is the proposed budget up on the website?
No, not yet.
but I really do want department head people and key employees to be part of this too, because it's part of the thinking out of the box.
Sure.
Of what a safe community is. Okay. So we set a date for the goal
For our
setting
goal-setting meeting in July.
for July, which is perfect, and I think that's all we need for now.
And then we will get to the other dates.
So Mondays or Wednesdays? Wednesdays are tough for Brian, I get it.
Well, the fourth, my question would just be, is the fourth Tuesday work for you guys? Because it sounded like all of you are available for the workshop on that day.
What I would suggest with future meetings after this meeting is that you set a regular meeting date. Clearly, there can be members that have conflicts and can't make it with this big a group. But
Right,
you just
right.
set a regular time that you can book ahead of time,
Right.
and it becomes a priority.
I think the fourth Tuesday, I mean, this worked for me, we're all here, a fourth Tuesday?
This isn't a Tuesday, hun.
What?
But your July meeting
Is
is,
this not a Tuesday? What is
No.
this?
Thursday.
Is it Thursday?
Tuesdays are better for me, for sure.
We can talk
Yeah,
about that later.
okay.
Yeah.
Established, are we done with number 3 then for now?
For now, we
Okay.
have a meeting set in July to set our goals and move forward from there.
Item number 4,
Item number 4 is the staff report that's in front of you that was delivered today. I understand you have not had time to review it, consider it. What it is it essentially lays out what is Measure U, what is the monies that are expected from Measure U, and what would be the proposed expenditures that we would frame into the budget. And again, I'm going to back up and remind everybody, we do not have this money at this point. Just because this oversight committee says, yes, this meets the parameters of Measure U, and we put it into a proposed budget, does not mean that this is going to happen tomorrow. This money we do not receive our money on July 1. Nobody hands us a check for $16 million and says run the city. It comes in over the course of the year through different taxes and fees and different things like that. So we looked at this, and from a staff perspective, after talking with all staff and seeing what is needed in all departments and putting it against Measure U, and also speaking with the council, seeing what is the needs of the city. One of the biggest needs that the city has is the public safety need. What we're looking at here under public safety, which is our first one, is police and fire. We're recommending that we frame 2 new firefighters into the budget with using Measure U funding, and also 2 new police officers into the budget using Measure U funding. Code enforcement, which was the number one thing that our city council said was needed in the city, we're recommending that we hire 2 additional code enforcement officers. Currently, we have 1. We have many issues with blight and with all sorts of issues that exist out there that our code enforcement officers would help us with. In our Parks and Trees department, we are recommending 4 Parks and Trees techs. Those are the people that actually go out and do the work. That's who takes care of your street trees, your parks, any public right-of-ways that you see that need any maintenance, cleanup, anything like that. They handle that. They're the ones that, and to relate that to safety, anything that goes on in the park, trees that aren't cared for, not just the parks, but any public right-of-way, where you have stop signs with limbs in front of them, people can't see, they do that. We also are recommending 4 public works operators to work in our streets department. Parks currently has 3 employees for all of the parks in the city. The streets department currently has 3 employees. So we just don't have adequate staff in there to take care of that. The streets department does exactly what it says. It takes care of the streets, potholes, any issue that can exist with the repainting of lines, painting of curbs, taking care of all of those issues. And oftentimes what will happen is the public works operators and the parks and trees techs will move back and forth between departments. So if they need a 9-man crew, they will take everybody. Right now, the most they can muster typically is 4 because, you know, somebody either isn't there. We have a couple people that are out with long-term injuries or illnesses, so they're just very depleted in that area. We felt that that is a safety issue. If these things are not taken care of, if the raised sidewalks, you can see from the trees, are not cut down or replaced, the panels in the sidewalks, that's a safety issue. People trip and get hurt. It's a liability issue for the city. Limbs, trees don't get trimmed properly. They fall on cars, they fall on people. That's a liability for the city. It's a safety issue. But there's a multitude of other issues that are out there. The administrative assistant is one because right now we currently, through what the city has experienced over the last 7 to 8 years, we have laid them all off. And, you know, all of these positions, no position in the city, police officer, firefighter, anything else, comes without support. Somebody has to be the backside of this. It's a very important job. I know it's not a glamorous one, and it's not one that people often see, but those positions must be taken care of. An example would be the HR manager. The HR manager takes care of all of your health insurance and all of your retirement and anything else that comes along that's part of that. If that's not taken care of, or if your paycheck isn't taken care of in an efficient manner, that's a distraction from work. I mean, so those things have to be taken care of in a proper manner. We have depleted our staffing down to none. Right now, myself, Mr. Lando, Ruth, Liz, we have no assistance. We do it ourselves. Anything that's prepared. Why did you get this in such a late manner? Because we have to make it. I mean, and it's us that does it. It's not anybody somewhere that makes it, gets it out, makes sure it's on time with our thoughts and everything. So it's, you know, we're hoping to improve those things. So that backside is very important. So we're suggesting one, because we also understand that that is not the highest of priorities, but it is a priority to us. Now, senior civil engineer. Right now we have no engineers in the city. The senior civil engineer, a big portion of what they do is prepare bids and make engineers' estimates and send those out for road repairs. So in order to repair the roads, you have to have somebody preparing the bid to get it, or the estimate with bidding parameters sent out so people can bid on the jobs. So we need that in the city. Right now, that all goes out. Last month, just for an example, I signed a check request for over $50,000 for a consultant. A lot of money. I mean, we're working like 12 to 15 engineers because we actually do have that many projects going. Mm-hmm. I really would like to see a city civil engineer that we have here that, you know, makes us their number one priority, our finances their number one priority, and make sure that everything that is being authorized through special funds, whether that's your sewer fund, roads funds, SB1 money, whatever it may be, is actually what should be being done. I have a pretty good grasp on it, but you know, I'm not an engineer. So we would like to see one purchased or hired out of that Measure U money. Right now, there is no janitorial staff for the city of Oroville. Right. City Hall only gets cleaned when staff cleans it. Garbages in the bathrooms don't get dumped. Toilets don't get cleaned. I think the last time we got cleaned, I did it.
And so that's what I was going to speak to, because I looked at that too, and I thought I had a completely different picture in my mind because I've lived it, as opposed to where somebody would not maybe consider this. I mean, I look at this and said, you know, public safety, well, or safety, or the safety or hazards. This is where, you know, getting together, where is the city going to be whole? And I can tell you the statement that he just said is a true statement. And I remember when we had to take the budget cuts and we had to let our little janitor go. And he was an amazing, amazing little guy. And he lost his job because of our budget cuts. I can tell you that those bathrooms are the worst thing ever. And to watch these people have to clean there after hours or during, because it's what they do. That's what they've been doing. To me, it's a safety hazard for the city employees to have to use workspaces that are that dirty. I know it. I see that it's a hard nut, but to me, it's like the general well-being of, you wouldn't let your kids go to the bathroom in there.
It's not a good investment of your money to pay me as much money as you do and have me clean your bathroom.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying I can't, and I'm not saying I won't. I'm just saying there's other things you can do. And the reason why you'll see us go with contracts on some things is because we want to be recession-proof. We want to have it so that if this thing
Right.
is supposed to generate 4.2, only generates 3.5, then we can eliminate those contracts. We can do different things and stay within that. So we're suggesting that as a potential use of this money that we would structure into our budget. We would move on to equipment. If we're going to, right now we have a fire vehicle that has over 100,000 miles on it that one of our battalion chiefs is operating. It needs to be replaced. So we were suggesting to replace that. The $55,000 is all of the vehicle, the equipment, the camper, everything necessary for the battalion chief's truck. We are suggesting that we replace 5 police vehicles at this time because we are reaching their age limit. And on the other side of this Measure U money, we are hiring 2 with Measure U. We're also hiring 3 more police officers using general fund dollars that are coming from an SRO contract that are in our budget. So if we're going to hire 5 police officers, we need 5 police cars because we don't have a large pool. We're still driving some old Crown Vics. You've probably seen them, and we're to the point that those need to go, or they'll actually be pushed down to the MLEs, which is our municipal law. So on the back page of your report, we're showing just the general category and expenditures that we were doing, but the other 4 things that are on there, the road repair and maintenance, that's $500,000 we want to push toward road repairs in the city of Oroville beyond your regular gas tax, SB1 dollars and things like that. These are your local district tax dollars going to your local roads. So we want to put that also into there. So as our engineer prepares our road repair list, we can throw $500,000 more dollars at that and do that much more toward repairing our roads or potholes or whatever they feel is the necessary and most pertinent repair to do. We have an equipment and a vehicle replacement fund. Right now, the city of Oroville has no contingency for anything. If something breaks, we have to start looking through the budget, try to figure out what to do. If you follow the council, a couple meetings ago, we had to buy a loader. I mean, and it was almost $200,000, and that's difficult to find in your budget when you don't have a lot of money, but we were able to do it. So what we want to do to alleviate that is we want to establish an equipment and a vehicle replacement fund that we put money into every year, so that when these things come up, unfortunately, I guess the best example is police cars that get wrecked. We do that on a regular basis, unfortunately, and they're very expensive to fix. So oftentimes, if they're high mileage and they go beyond what the value of the vehicle is, we replace them. And they're about $55,000 a pop, as you saw previously. So we're suggesting that we establish equipment replacement funds and also vehicle replacement funds so that we have the backbone behind them. The last thing that we're suggesting is a fund reserve of setting $1.5 million aside. We have no idea what the year is going to bring us, what's going to happen. It's just being conservative with our budgeting. At the last quarter, as we get through the year, if we get to the last quarter and nothing's happened and that $1.5 million is sitting there, then we have some decisions to make. What are we going to do with that money? We can either carry it forward, it can go toward your pension stabilization issue that you have in the city, or it can go toward other issues. It just depends on what this oversight committee through consultation and council direction is at that point. But we're suggesting we be very conservative and we stay back away from the edge and not budget right to the edge and over.
I have a clarifying question.
Yes, ma'am.
The replacement fund for the equipment and vehicles are contingency funds, so somewhat reserve funds. They're not allocated specifically.
What happens, I was going to talk to those last 2 items. So if the city had the resources, and some cities do, particularly in other states, if you need a fire engine, let's use that for an example, that might cost you $500,000 and it might last for 20 years. What you should do, if you're fiscally sound, you put $25,000 a year away, and at the end of the life expectancy, you have the money. It's not an issue of council finding out where they get it. It's specifically envisioned in this measure. If you read the handout, you'll see that vehicle maintenance and repair is specifically envisioned. So if we're acting fiscally prudently, we set up funds for our vehicles and major equipment so that it's just a routine budget item. In the past, obviously, the city hadn't been able to do that. And then I'm going to disagree a little with Bill in terms of the reserve. This city operates on a razor-thin margin. We should have a reserve of at least half a year in the bank. And at least for the first few years, I'd strongly recommend to you and to council that they establish that reserve and build it up. The 1.5 to me per year is minimum to get this city where it ought to be, so you don't have to worry about the next recession, which, you know, people keep saying is down the road. So, those were my comments, Bill.
Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think that's good advice from, somebody who has a lot of wisdom in this, much more than I do myself, so I will yield to those. I agree with that. As we move on through the report, just you look by category and expenditure, there's some explanation that needs to come to the Oversight Committee in there because the numbers don't match. We're suggesting $4.8 million of expenditures and only $4.2 million of revenue. There's one quarter that's occurring in this fiscal year in 18-19. So that means April, May, June. We're going to somewhere between, I think the estimate was between $600,000 and $750,000. We estimated low of what that might be because of non-compliance and just something new that's occurring with our community. So we estimated low and we rolled that money into reserves. Is what our suggestion is. Not expend, because we're essentially betting on the come. I mean, we don't know what that money's going to be. So we chose to be conservative and put that into reserve. So what we're suggesting is the categories and the expenditures as laid out in the report. And what we're looking for out of this is thoughts, comments, and what we want to do is take this forward, structure it into our budget to take back to the city council. And again, I'm going to stress, we're not doing any of this tomorrow. We don't have the money. This is just framework that, by our estimation, by our interpretation of Measure U, meets the parameters of Measure U. So next year will be much better. We'll have more time to go through this, more time to plan, organize, and include your thoughts in this.
I have a procedural question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm trying to put together the whole idea that we are sanctioning or approving that these are within the budget, within the parameters of the expenditures. So we do that and put it into the budget in July.
Correct.
We do get monthly income August, September, October, but we haven't had our meeting yet. Will any of these expenditures be made throughout the year
Yes.
without the committee's approval?
Yes, the committee does not approve it.
Or
The-
recommend it? Or
The committee ensures that it meets the parameters of Measure U. That's all.
So we ensure that it meets parameter U, or not parameters of U, for this. But what we're really looking forward for our goal is next year's budget?
Next fiscal year's budget, because our budgeting runs from July to June.
So July 2020 fiscal budget is what
No,
we're working
we're
on.
working on July of 19 through June of 20. Because we have a budget right around the corner. We have one coming here shortly.
But
and
I understand that. So if it's already in the budget.
It's not
how-
there yet. We haven't.
Well, it's going to be,
It's going, well,
maybe. I'm just asking
we're
procedurally.
going to,
So-
yes, we are going to create a budget. Regardless, we are going to create a budget. We have to. We have to come to our council, the first meeting in July with a budget. So, but what we're
Okay.
trying to do is create a preliminary one so that we can get that out to everybody to look at and see what is in there. Let the council study it, let the council come back with recommendation or changes, because they can direct change in anything. What we're talking about, that this structure is going to go into the fiscal year 1920. So this next year that I'm talking about, when I say next year, I'm talking about 2021. We're going to have a much better picture and a much easier process to move into this because we'll have more time behind us.
That's great. One thing I want to,
Yeah, and so,
Thank you.
yeah.
one thing I want to say, I'm fine with the proposal, and I know it's going to be, I know it's fluid. My only hesitation, and then I got to go because I have previously scheduled before this was scheduled.
Yes, sir.
My kids are performing at the State Theater, and as their only dad, I must be there.
Must be there.
But my only hesitation is 'cause I know we've been in negotiations with the fire department for some time with their contract. So my recommendation would be until a contract is agreed upon. I wouldn't be comfortable with hiring more fire department officers until that's completed.
Yes, sir.
Throwing more mess into the mix.
And I was gonna say, because
And I gotta
it's a
go.
legitimate concern, that these funds really can't be expended. They get into the budget, but they can't be expended until probably next January.
Yeah, I was
And we're
gonna say,
certainly gonna wait for the revenue to make sure it's there before we, for example, hire folks. So we'll hire them and then turn around and lay them off. And then in addition to that, it takes 3 to 6 months, probably conservatively, to hire
Easily,
anybody. The others are really going into reserve funds, if you look at it, road repair,
Right.
equipment replacement, vehicle, that all winds up, so that you really will have another shot at it. Certainly, what we're looking for is your recommendation, and that's what you're making. And within the short time frame, if you want to make different recommendations, that's fine. It's a recommendation to council that will go forward in the budget.
so that would be Sherry and Eric over here. So just as a housekeeping, if you want to speak, push the request to speak button. And for the Charlie Browns over here, just raise your hand and I'll see you. Okay?
So Linda, you actually have Brian, Flicker, and Sherry in there, according to what's on the screen.
Who's Pittman?
Brian.
Brian's Pittman, yeah.
Brian Pittman.
And Draper.
We can identify from
So I'm
these sides.
like, I'm trying to figure, okay,
I'm
so
myself.
Brian, thank you. You had a question or a statement?
Yeah, just clarification, I think. I feel like we're rubber stamping this, and I think I would be more comfortable if we just said, you know, money spent on police officers, money spent on fire department, money spent on vehicle replacements, money put in the reserve fund, without the actual amount, because really all we're doing is approving that funds are being appropriately spent, not the amount. Because basically we're saying, spend $4.8 million is what I feel like with this, when I think our job is to say money spent on police officers is appropriate. And then the city council will decide how many police officers. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're correct. We were trying to just create a picture so you can see, you know, what our intent was, where we were going, because we really didn't have nothing to guide us on this. So we were trying to create something so that when you read it, you can say, okay, what does that mean? If I say, well, I'm going to hire police officers and I'm going to hire firemen and I'm going to hire an engineer, and that's $4.8 million. And, you know, we were just trying to create some sort of a framework so you could see this is what our intent is, because like I say, this is the first go. We have no guidance on this really at this point. So I think as we go, we'll get better at this. This was just a roadmap for
And for
the
budget
oversight and
purposes
for
and-
us, so that we can put that in, because even after these things get put into the budget, you know, we still have to go back to the city council. And I would think that if we do something at a staff level that really inflames the oversight committee, I would encourage you to come down here on a Tuesday and go, that is not anything close to what, you know, we had talked about. You know, this is not what those Measure U monies were for. Not only I encourage you to do that, please do that, because this is very important to me that this is spent appropriately.
So, and
But
to Brian's, they have to actually put dollar figures in for the budget. And so,
I know they do for the budget, but
Right,
not necessarily
right.
for this committee, because we're only approving the types of money spent, not the amount.
right. Good point.
I
Good
think if
point.
that's, I think either way, it's the committee making a recommendation in terms of this conforming to Measure U. If you wanted to make that as a motion, that would be what moves forward into council discussion.
Okay, Sherry and then Eric?
Well, my concern, it's funny that I'm sitting here, my concern was, road repair. At the last council meeting, there was comment made about that, from this chair, I believe, about the trucks up and down the roadways, and the comment was made, I think by you, Bill, about that they were only on 162 for the main part, they were only on this road for the main part. Have you been down Feather River Boulevard?
What's the question regarding Measure U?
Well, I guess my concern is it's not.
Yeah, I was
It's
gonna
not.
say it's
You just,
not.
I think what you're saying, I think what I'm hearing is you don't think there's enough money there.
Yeah, pretty
Is
much.
that what I'm, okay, that's a legitimate, you know, question and concern, and it's,
So I have the same event.
But,
I
well,
need to
don't
be at.
forget, this is Measure U money.
Right.
That is a district tax. It's not your SB1 dollars, it's not your gas tax dollars. Ruth, what do we have in that fund right now for road repair?
I had a meeting with our Mike Massar, our city engineer, on Tuesday, and we went over all the road budgets. We have over $1 million in other budgets that are going to road repair. So, this is in addition to that. So
It was
we'll have-
also mentioned
So,
at council,
Yeah.
because that was the commentary. I don't recall Bill saying only 162, I think.
Well,
When I was
But-
talking about
Listed a
routes to the
couple of-
dam.
yeah.
But in the governor's budget, assuming it goes through and is approved, there's an extra $2 million to help with those repairs.
And,
That's
and I
what I was
think
gonna say.
that's a legitimate question that you're asking, and it's one that needs to be teased out. What does this mean? What does Measure U, because this is augmentation of your regular monies that are, you're putting extra dollars toward your road. So it is a good question.
So, Eric, and then Mark, but I have the same event to be at. Is there something that we,
Well, then Mark can take over the meeting.
right, do I need to stay, guys? My grandkids are performing.
I think that should be a priority. Are we gonna vote?
I appreciate the confidence in me being the chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jackie, are you
Enjoy.
gonna change
So-
these names in here for the next meeting?
I didn't think you guys were gonna use the queue, so I did not, because there's people over there, so next time I will change them.
Thank you.
Not gonna be using the queue anymore, 'cause I've never used it.
I'll teach you how to use it.
Not tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, by the way, good job, staff, for putting this together. Brian, I understand what you're saying. That's the format that they just always use because everybody wants numbers. And
Sure. And we can change this and tailor it. I mean, it doesn't have to be this way. That's just the way it is this time.
So,
Sorry, the kindergartners are getting ready to start.
Take
So-
pictures.
just to dovetail on Brian's comment, I think it's important at the least to have proportioned recommendation, because I think that as it relates to Measure U. So, well, we want 50% or 30%, even if you didn't have a dollar figure, I think you need to provide some sort of a recommendation as it pertains to oversight, as it pertains to Measure U. So at the least, if you weren't comfortable with numbers, you think you need to have, well, we want X amount of a percent going to. And then also I think with the workshop up and coming, it's important also to have other views of some of the additional monies, like you're talking about with the state budget to 2 million, and then there's federal dollars coming in for our roads as well as it relates to the spillway incident. And I think that'll help kind of, gather additional information to feed into as you make some of these recommendations. Because if we're getting an additional, let's say, 5 million or 6 million for roads, then maybe we want to reduce that percentage down a little bit, just for an example.
Sure. And I think that, at the next meeting that we have, you'll have a budget in front of you can look at, so that it may make a little more sense. And I know this is coming at you fast and this is coming at you blind. I mean, I understand that. We just need parameters to build a budget because we're under a time frame, which I know is not what you want to hear, but that's what the truth is.
But it really is not our place to put figures in there. That's city council's job. Our
Yes, sir.
job is to say whether it's an appropriate use,
Yes, sir.
not the amount that's being used, but whether the actual dollars are appropriate in this category.
Right.
We might make a recommendation, but I'm not comfortable rubber stamping this other than saying the types of monies being proposed are appropriate,
Well, and
but not necessarily the amounts.
And if I could share with you, the numbers that we're putting here, and I'm just going to grab the police officer and the firefighter just for hypothetical. They do not cost $150,000 on the head. Those appropriate numbers will be put in the budget. It's a representation of how much of that budget we expect, or round numbers, to eat up to for those positions. So those monies are there. Exact numbers will come back. You will get that quarterly. We received this much money. We expended this much money in these accounts. So for these purposes. So you will see where the money went that was received and how it was utilized and what that actual cost was. I understand what you're saying, and we're not trying to get you to say, hey, 300,000 here, $261,739.33 over there. We're trying to just give you a representation of how we broke up $4.2 million. And, you know, just to share with you on the side, you would think that's a lot of money, but when you start looking at all and assessing the needs of the city, man, that goes quick. I mean, that's just, but we're very grateful for what we have. I mean, but, you know, I think we can fine tune this, Mr. Flicker, and get it to a more palatable and reasonable
So
condition
to
for you.
meet your needs for budgetary purposes, would it suffice if I made a motion that said, we approve the types of funds requested in this outline?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it would.
Then I make that motion.
I think we have Steve.
Well, I can make a motion, they can discuss it after it receives a second.
So we do have a motion on the floor. Go ahead,
So-
Mr. Terry.
Was there a second?
I'll second.
Well, as a standpoint, Brian, while I understand what you're saying, I would disagree also, because I don't see this as rubber stamping. Personally, it helps me to see an estimated dollar amount there, gives me a reference point. I also, as what Eric said, personally, I would like to see that and a percentage. It just kind of, it's something, I understand numbers. It gives me something to look at and wrap my brain around it and know what I'm looking at. Rather than just saying, well, yeah, but okay, this kind of tells me a little bit more. It just,
Yeah,
I like the
agree
detail.
that we have the numbers. I think that's nice to have to get the information, but our job as a body is not to prove the amounts, only the types.
I understand that. But on the other side of it, from my personal standpoint, when I do a budget for the mission, I do that budget, I have to estimate the amounts of the income that's coming in. I don't have exact figures. I still have to put the numbers in. My board will banty that back and forth, as the council will. All I'm doing is looking, I'm putting that down, so I get this, and I don't see it as rubber stamping.
Now, I understand the process. I prepared lots of million-dollar budgets, but I just think it's outside the scope of what this committee was, my understanding of it anyway.
We certainly, you know, as we move into our July meeting and we do more formation and more organization and, you know, we fine tune this as to what you would like to see, we'll certainly do that.
If the committee does approve the motion, it's perfectly appropriate. It's perfectly within the scope. And it's also perfectly in the scope to talk about dollars, either one. But there is a motion there.
Thank you. I think that having the numbers here is very helpful, but I agree with Brian that we should just look at some general categories at this point, because we do not want to get into, I only want 3 public works operators, not 4, and we want to spend the money over here. Like, we don't have the ability to make those decisions yet until we see the July budget and have our working session. So I agree that we should, for that reason, procedurally, you know, put it in categories, and then we 4.2 into public works, administrative experience, and then the numbers will follow. Thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, I'm fine. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to, the reason why we have it part of why we have it broke up into there is for the budgeting purposes. I mean, to show in each one of those. It is not the charge of this oversight committee to determine the number of employees that we hire into any department. We have professionals that will tell you what they need. This oversight committee certainly can make recommendations and say, we recommend you spend all $4 million on police officers. Okay, we would recommend that you don't do that. I mean, but you could make that recommendation, and we are going to, at the direction of this committee, take that recommendation forward to the council. But we're also going to take forward another recommendation that says our professionals tell us that's not the thing to do. This is what the oversight committee said, but that is not the thing to do. So, you know, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I just, you know, and I'm not trying to be overly picky or pointy. I agree with Mr. Flicker that, you know, police, fire, you know, whatever categories. But I also want to bring back numbers so you know what I'm talking about when I say you know, if I'm spending 70% of the budget on public safety or a Measure U, I want you to know I'm spending 70% of that money there, 30% on something else, or percentage-wise. And we can break that up to maybe, you know, pie charts or something next time so you see what the breakup of the money is instead of, you know, maybe all of this plus some more is what you're looking for. So
Can I say again that the motion that was made is very appropriate, that as you have your work session and you decide that you want to in fact have more, for example, police officers or more firefighters. You certainly can talk about it. As now we've said multiple times, they aren't going to be hired before then anyhow. So the motion that's made really does meet the intent of the committee.
I was just gonna ask, could we rephrase that again, restate, did the clerk transcribe the motion?
The motion, yeah, I would
Yeah,
kind
just-
of like to hear it again.
That, I move that this committee approve the categories outlined in the staff report.
Very good.
So the categories,
Are appropriate to measure use.
and just to continue the discussion, the categories such as park and trees.
Yeah, all the things outlined in here, so. That we're saying these categories are appropriate use of Measure U funds.
Okay. So,
Mark,
go ahead, Dave. I'm sorry.
These categories inclusive, or we can have categories as?
Yeah, no, they're saying, we want to spend this money this way, and we're saying, yes, this is appropriate categories to spend Measure U monies on.
But just to throw a wrench in the works, if in July we decide, or through our meeting and goal setting and things like that, something changes, then we will change it at that time. So something could be added then. We're just saying this now. We're framing a budget. We need something to frame to. Right. No. I don't think you're constrained to anything as long as it meets the original, not just the written word, but what was the intent of Measure U.
Steve, did you have something?
so just for clarification, on this motion, then, if the motion is passed, then the next reference will be without numbers or anything like that. Is that what the intent of your motion would be?
No, only for this report, so they can prepare a budget.
Okay.
So Measure U, you gave us the purpose.
Still on.
You turned yourself off.
There you go, should be on now.
In the handout, it says, chapter 3.18.
Yes, sir.
Ordinance number 1829.
Correct.
On page 2, it says the purpose, and then on number A, or letter A, I'm sorry, it says to maintain and preserve City of Oroville public services, including police protection, fire suppression, vehicle repair and maintenance, finance analyst, and human resources services with the city. So on our first Oversight Committee meeting, it's very, very challenging to recommend that we hire park technicians and a senior engineer for $170,000 a year. I understand that there's arguments to be made, but I don't know if it's prudent of us to just come in and say, okay, let's hire park technicians and
Point of clarification, if you look further, 3.18.075C, you're going to see
Going.
that the committee should make a recommendation to provide local public services, including but not limited to, and it goes on, has things like finance analyst, et cetera. So if you can read that section, I think you'll see it's a little broader.
so we're talking about C on page 2?
On page 3.
Page 3.
On page 3.
3.18.075 parentheses. And I think that, where we get into the engineer part of it, part of this is for roads. And we have to have, that key piece in there to do that. So, I think that, and I know this is a lot to talk about really
It is.
quick.
It is, and it's just hard as an oversight body to come in and, how prudent is $170,000 a year for a senior engineer? I don't know.
Wanted to let you know that includes benefits, it's salary and benefits, so it's inclusive of both of them.
We don't know what we're spending with the contract. You said you wrote a check for $50,000. I don't know what that means.
I can tell you right now, I'm spending at least $120,000 for day-to-day activity of the engineer without
we could
anything
save
else.
$50,000
And that's
by
one day a
contracting
year.
it out.
Well, that's one day a year, or I'm sorry, one day a week that I get an engineer. I don't have an engineer here
And
5
Mike,
days
that's
a week.
why I wasn't comfortable putting dollars to it. I just want to say the category is appropriate. I'm not gonna say that it's appropriate to spend that amount of money.
I understand your motion and the second, I'm just trying to throw a little discussion in.
Sure.
Well, the other part of this too is it says we'll meet with department heads, and pretty much this is what your department heads are gonna be asking for.
Yes. Well, your department heads are here.
I mean, you know,
Her
this is
and I.
what they're asking for. So we've made that meeting. So we've met that
Well,
part of our requirement.
And I think this deserves a lot more conversation. I mean, it's just, we're in a time crunch right now, really, honestly, is what it comes down to. I mean, we need to get something out there. And I guess the good news, the only saving grace for this is I would never suggest you do this without, in this kind of a time crunch, is this money don't exist right now. It's not being spent. It's a hypothetical framework of what we intend on doing, which can be changed at any time. It's not something that, we're gonna cut checks tomorrow and the money's gone and there's nothing we can do about it. So, that's what we're suggesting. I think that the Measure U, I believe that does meet that, just because it also talks about in there that this is to provide all services, or local public services, including not limited to. And I think the things that are put in there are examples of local public services. It's not limiting you to just those services.
I understand that, but I think it was sold to the citizens, the voters, as a public safety measure. So we could, we could deviate and say, everything's part of public safety. Well, we have a motion and we have a second. So.
Any further discussion?
Do we have any further discussion? Does anyone else wanna? All in favor? Say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
We'll see you at the next meeting.
We'll see you in July. Thank you, I
That
appreciate it.
concludes our agenda.
You got to ring the bell.
I banged the gavel.
Bang the gavel.
You got to bang the gavel.
Thank you, everybody.
You can take it with you.
It's not a Brown Act meeting, but please explain to me why this isn't just a rubber stamp.
Okay, so
What are we
immediately
gonna say?
after they stop talking,
I
come
mean-
in and turn these off. Thank you, because I gotta upload it on the website.